It'll be fun. It'll be fun. Yeah.
Welcome, everybody, to what is, I think, objectively going to be the coolest session of the whole festival with the great David Rubenstein in conversation with Tom Ferry, who's the founder and executive director of the Aspen Institute's Sports and Society program. And the Sports and Society program is really one of a kind in the country. We are so proud of it. And Tom is a recovering journalist who has become a community education leader through our Sport and Society program. Now, if you read your description, you saw that we are prompted with this question. What if there were a pill that could help people move, think, and sleep better, reduce anxiety and depression, and make a difference on 13 types of cancer, with the side effects being you make more friends and you make more money? Now, of course, Tom wrote that prompt, so let's interrogate him on why he knows physical fitness, athletic experience to be this great pill that makes a difference in individual and community well-being. David is the co-founder and co-chair of the Carlyle Group. He is an extraordinary business leader, philanthropist, interviewer, as I think many of you know, and also, as you can tell from his attire, he is the owner of our hometown team, the Baltimore Orioles. So David, thank you for joining us. Tom, thank you for joining us. And one other note, Tom's work is fascinating, and among other things, he'll gather communities up to develop roadmaps or blueprints for how to get more young people up and playing. And he's done this in Hawaii, in Eastern Michigan, in Baltimore, and in the Roaring Fork Valley here. He just completed a study which looked at, are young people involved in athletics and sport and physical fitness? If they're not, what are the barriers? What can be done? Very positive and proactive approach to getting more young people, of course, to have that pill that we know as sports and physical fitness. So on that note, please join me in welcoming David and Tom to the stage.
Thank you all. At the beginning, I just want to ask people, how many of you were superstar athletes when you were little? Okay. How many of you thought you'd be a professional athlete? Wow. How many of you realize that you're not going to be a professional athlete at 15? At 20? Okay. How many of you think you're a good athlete now? Wow. How many of you exercise every day? Wow. How many of you have children who exercise every day? How many of you have grandchildren exercise? Wow. Okay. Well, this is a fit group. I have to be honest with you at the beginning. We have misled you. This was promoted as a situation where I was going to be interviewed by a person who actually knows something about this, and I decided yesterday it'd be better if I interviewed him because he knows everything. I don't really know much about it. As you can see, I'm not that fit, and I've never thought I was a great athlete. I was a Jewish baseball player in Little League at 8, and I thought I was an all-star, and I thought I would get to the major leagues, but I later realized you have to be an owner to be Jewish and get to the major leagues. As a player, you're not going to make it. Okay, so let's talk about your own background. So were you an athlete?
I was a kid growing up in Florida who played everything and developed all-around athleticism and physical literacy, but by the time I got to high school, I got cut from all my teams.
Okay.
So no.
All right, well, at least you got to try out. I couldn't even try out. But okay, so you grew up in Florida, and how did you wind up at ESPN? You were an ESPN investigative reporter, right?
Right. It's because I got cut from all my teams, and I decided I might as well write about sports.
Okay.
So that led to sports journalism, Miami Herald, LA Times, ESPN for 20 years.
Okay. So after interviewing athletes for a couple, I guess, decades, do you think athletes are pretty smart or not as smart as you wanted them to be?
You know what? There's that dumb jock myth, which I think is the dumbest thing of all time. If you think about what an athlete does when they're making decisions on a court or on a field, think about the processing power. You've got someone who, I used to cover the NBA. Kurt Rambis would grab the ball and he passed it out to Magic. Magic is coming down the court. He's got a clock. He's got a coach yelling at him. He's got four teammates, all who have different skills. There are 5 people covering these players. Someone's trying to steal the ball from him at the same time, and he has to process all of that information extremely quickly and then have his brain talk down to his hands so he can deliver a ball to a spot that doesn't even look like it's open. That's processing power. That is intelligence that I don't think we recognize. And I think we can actually, if we recognize that more, we can help athletes become, do better in academics and education.
So if you
in life.
were going to have dinner with an owner of a team or an athlete on the team, what would be more uplifting for you? An owner or the athlete? Who would you rather have dinner with?
If the owner is you, David,
No, but let's say it's not me.
that's the athlete.
All right, who was the most impressive single athlete you ever wrote about?
Oh boy. I mean, Magic definitely was up there. You know, the athletes who really impressed me are honestly those who were good athletes in college, but who went on to do something later in life and use those skills.
Like as an example, who would that be?
Ramogi Huma. Does anybody in this room know who Ramogi Huma is? Ramogi Huma is a former UCLA linebacker, and he is changing college sports. He's the guy who put in motion everything you see happening with college sports today. He was a linebacker at UCLA, didn't like the NCAA rules, thought it was an unfair cartel, began to organize players, got the state of California and Governor Newsom to sign the NIL bill, which caused all the other states to sign the NIL bills, which led to the Supreme Court making decisions that have turned the whole thing upside down. So here's a guy who developed confidence and an ability to rally people and change a system just from his office.
Do you think this is a good thing? Now, college athletes are being paid if they're in one of the 2 or 3 big money sports. And how do they go to class and they're getting paid $2 million a year, $3 million a year? Do they really have the incentive to go to class? And is this better for the country or not?
I think all of this college sports reform is very disruptive right now, and it seems chaotic, and it is chaotic. Players jumping, portal, all this stuff. We're in a transition phase. We're moving from a model of college sports that was built on antitrust violations. Right. That's what the Supreme Court said in a 9-0 ruling. And NCAA keeps getting hammered in every case because it's built this idea of amateurism in which we're going to collect lots of money on the side, just like the pro teams do, and we're going to pay our coaches crazy amounts of money and do the big charters and the fancy locker rooms. But when it comes to the players, nope, we're all going to agree through cartel behavior that we're going to cap their and the courts just are like, that doesn't work. And so I think we're going to get to a place where college sports looks a lot more like, or operates the economic model like professional sports does. We will have collective bargaining. We will have professionalized athletes. It's just, we're not entirely there yet.
A major college basketball coach told me recently that he now has to pay $2 and maybe $2.5 million for his freshmen coming in, because if he doesn't do that, somebody else will, and it's basically just like being a professional completely.
Yeah, but they are all these athletes that they're receiving that kind of money have economic value. That's the thing. Right. It was black market. It was under the table previously. Now it's above board.
Well, one more question about this before we get into what you really wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
Which, most professional athletes don't make it in professional sports for very long. Mm-hmm. I think the NFL, the average person is maybe 4 years, maybe baseball is 5 years. So after they're done being a professional baseball, basketball, football player, what do these guys really do with the rest of their life? You can imagine, all of you said you're done with whatever your career is at the age of 28. Now, imagine what you do. What do you do with the rest of your life? You've been a professional athlete pretty much for 6-7 years. You're not good enough to play in your 30s, and you're done. So what do you do with the rest of your life? How have you found these athletes adjusting to that?
It all depends on whether an athlete defined themselves at an early age as an athlete only or more whole person. So did they take their school seriously? Did they develop relationships outside of their team? Did they join clubs that had nothing to do with sports? Did they travel? If they're a well-rounded individual, then they usually do very, very well in life. But if they've had this identity foreclosure as an athlete, and when that shuts down, they don't often know where to start.
One of the athletes I've met over the years who's a very good friend of mine is a guy who I really admire. His name is Grant Hill. His mother was on the board with me at Duke and at Kennedy Center. And Grant Hill was an only child, as I am, so I like only children sometimes when they can show that they can overcome the disadvantage maybe of being an only child. And he was one of the best basketball players ever at Duke, graduated, which is very unusual today, and then went to the NBA, and had he not had an ankle problem, would have been as good as Michael Jordan probably, but he still was in the College Hall of Fame, Basketball Hall of Fame, and now he's the head of the USA Basketball. He's running the USA Olympic team. He selects the players, and he's one of the few players in the NBA who actually has a college degree and has no children out of wedlock. Very unusual. It's very unusual in the NBA, believe me. That's the kind of role model I think we should want to have for more of our athletes, and we don't have as many of them as I wish we did, but that's a whole separate subject. So
He's a great art collector, too.
he does African-American art. He has one of the best collections in the United States. So how did you go from being an ESPN reporter, covering stories, investigative things, to writing this book that you wrote that led to you're now being at Aspen?
Look, you get into journalism, especially someone like myself. I turned 60 in a couple weeks, so I'm a child of the 70s.
Where's the gray hair?
It's right there. There's plenty.
Yeah.
There's plenty.
No,
The lights are
this
deceptive.
is gray hair. This is gray hair. That's not gray hair.
But I was a child of the 70s, so Watergate and all that stuff. And so people like me went into journalism at that time, and newspapers were riding high, to change the world, to make, through truth, in theory, you could change systems. So I was an investigative reporter for 20 years. I put plenty of people on hot seats, half-hour shows, Outside the Lines, E60, things like that. And I just got a little tired of just laying out the problem, because I would spend so much time digging into something, and people might cry, or they might feel something, and then like a day later, everything moves on, and there was no policy change. So I spoke here about my book in 2008 or 2009, and Walter Isaacson and Elliot Gerson said, that was great. Would you like to start a sports and society program? And I thought, you know what? Maybe this is a way to take my network and work with Aspen's ability to reach into other places, and we could build a shared framework on how to rebuild sports in America so every child has an opportunity to be active through sports, regardless of background or ability.
Did they tell you they were going to pay you for this, or they just wanted it free?
Well, that was the funny thing. I was all excited, and I asked Elliot, I said, so what is, because I was a TV reporter, I was paid pretty well. I'm like, what is this? He's like, oh, there's no salary. You have to raise all the money yourself.
Okay.
Elliot is one of the best salesmen of all time, because I took it and basically lost interest in doing my ESPN work.
Okay. So the premise of your book and what you're doing here is that if children learn how to be athletic when they're younger, they're more likely to be athletic when they're older, and therefore more likely to avoid some of the problems that come about from being out of shape, and more likely to have the skills of how to get along with people, teamwork, and so forth. And what I would observe, I assume you think this is true as well, that many of the times people who succeed in life professionally are people that were athletes younger in their career, either team sports or individual sports, and we can go through a list of some of the most famous people who were great athletes when they were younger. So is that the premise of yours?
That is the premise, and all of that is captured in this
Okay.
slide that if I can figure out.
And everybody see this slide?
Up, back.
There it is.
So, yeah, and it's not about being a great athlete. It's about literally just being physically active. The research shows that if you move your body at an early age, you're 1/10 as likely to be obese, you're more likely to stay in school, you're less likely to take drugs. There are higher binge drinking rates with athletes, so not all the data is good. But lower rates of depression, healthcare costs go down. You're less likely to suffer, again, like Dan said, 13 types of cancer according to the NIH, including breast cancer. And then because you're an active parent, you're a good role model for your kids, and so you're more likely to have an active kid. So the whole premise of what we're doing within Project Play is how do you get kids off the couch without running them into the ground so they can derive all the benefits that.
Now, I've observed that a lot of professional athletes, when they stop being professional athletes, they get heavier and around the belly in the case of men. Like Oscar Robertson looked like he was the greatest basketball player ever practically, and he looks like he's pregnant with twins sometimes when I've seen him. So why do athletes not keep in shape once they stop being a professional athlete? Is it they're used to eating a lot of calories or what?
It's partly that. It's often they have injuries. ACL injuries, knee injuries can just make you inactive for life. We have an epidemic right now with knee injuries. I mean, they're up 28%, I think, over the past decade based upon our research in high school athletes. So if you can't move, you can't run, you can't be active for life. It's a real problem what we have. And pro athletes, they just suffer many more injuries. And they're also, at some point, they're no longer playing for intrinsic rewards. They're playing for extrinsic rewards. It's money or otherwise. And when that dries up, they're like, well, why am I still doing this?
What's the chance of somebody 50 years old, a little out of shape, hasn't been a great athlete, all of a sudden getting inspired and saying, I'm going to get in shape, I'm going to exercise, I'm going to eat right? How often does that really happen for more than a week?
Extremely hard. It means it's very,
I
very,
tried
very
for
hard.
2 days, and after
Right.
2 days I say, well, I guess I didn't really like exercise that much. I'm
Right.
tired of it.
Right.
But
I mean, that's why we focus on youth, ages 6 to 17. Because if you can develop the physical literacy and the love of game and the confidence, then you could play in your company softball team or beer league soccer, whatever else. It's so hard to introduce that kind of activity at a later age.
have you ever heard the saying that I get my exercise being a pallbearer at the funeral of my friends who exercise a lot?
Haven't heard that.
Because sometimes, you've ever seen like Jim Fix, who was Mr. Running,
Yeah.
he dropped dead of a heart attack while he was running. I'm always worried if I run, I might drop dead.
Yeah, all right. Well, never mind what I just said. Let's cancel this whole session.
Okay. All right, so that's not something I should worry about?
No, you shouldn't worry about that.
What about walking? Is walking the best thing you can do?
Walking's great. Walking's terrific. Yeah, just moving your body in some form or another.
Okay, so if you were recommending what parents or grandparents should do with their children and grandchildren, would it be nudge them to exercise more? How do you tell your child, you could be a little fitter? How do you tell your child that?
You don't tell your child, you listen to your child. I mean, the bottom line is when you're born to move. You're designed, you're genetically this is what kids want to do. As adults, we end up kind of wrecking that sometimes by taking what we want them to do and imposing it. So the first thing I would do as a parent or a child or a grandparent is ask the kid what they want. What do you want to play? Is it really the sports that I played, or what else looks fun? Watch the Olympics in a month and a half. Say, hey, does swimming look interesting? Does fencing? And then go find a club. Start design from them first as opposed to your own needs.
All right, is it better to do team sport if you're going to be active the rest of your life, or is it better to do an individual sport? Like if you play tennis or golf, presumably you can do that the rest of your life. Hard to play football the rest of your life.
Yeah, it's not an either or. Typically, sports are introduced to kids through teams. And that's good. That's fine because kids want social experiences. They want to be with their friends. They want to play. They don't want to just be alone grinding on soccer or golf skills or tennis skills. But once you get into the teenage years, individual sports become really important, and those are often the type of sports that people play for
So
life.
what do you do to exercise? Are you a golfer, a tenniser, or what do you do?
Beach volleyball. I live in San Clemente, California, and I play beach volleyball.
Girls beach volleyball, or just men's?
David, this is the best environment, the best sport environment I've ever been exposed to. It's half men, half women, ages 18 to 83. Half of the people get all their ideas from Fox News. The other half get them from MSNBC. We come together. We're not trying to win political arguments. We're trying to see each other as human beings and solve problems, even if it's just winning a point together. I love it. I do this 3 days a week. I get my physical, my emotional, my connection to nature. It's
So
literally.
you play beach volleyball 3 days a week,
I do.
and you live in New York City?
No, yeah, right.
Where do you do that?
San Clemente, California,
Wow.
in the shadow of Richard Nixon's old Western White House, actually.
Wow, okay. So today, I observed that people who are president of the United States, actually, whether you like them or not, actually a lot of them were athletes. Is that a good or bad thing? Many of them, you go back, Eisenhower was a football player, Kennedy was a football player, Ford was a football player. A lot of them were athletes. Biden was a football player, Trump was a baseball player. So is this a good or bad thing? Does it lead to being president of the United States if you're a good athlete, or does it make a difference?
Sport is a neutral institution,
Right.
meaning sport can produce good character habits or bad character habits. It's how you are taught to think about winning and competition and working with other people, and how you view your opponent, and the respect for rules, which is the respect for law. I think it can be and has been in most cases quite positive, but not always.
If you live long enough, almost certainly you will get cancer of one type. Now, if you're a man and you're in your 80s and you get prostate cancer, you're probably going to die of something else, so that's not your biggest problem. But the body is not designed to go cancer-free until age 100. So what is the best way to prevent cancer by exercising? Your theory is that you maybe can mitigate the impact of the onset of cancer if you exercise. Tell us about that.
I mean, exercise 3 times a week, moderately. Extreme exercise can be good, but it can also lead to a lot of injuries. Just moving your body where you're working up a sweat 3 to 5 times a week is the best way. I mean, there's actually been research, and please don't hold me, I might get something slightly wrong here, but they looked at people who have been consistently physically active through, I think it was cycling and swimming over a long period of time, and the cells in their body were 20 years younger than the cells in people who've been sedentary. So the point is you just have sustained activity over a period.
What about if you sit in a sauna and you sweat a lot? Is that counted? Is that good? That doesn't count?
Is that your
That's
sport?
my exercise. I sweat a
Okay,
lot.
you're an
That doesn't
athlete.
work?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought that would, you sweat a lot. I thought that'd be helpful. Because, okay. So today, how is Aspen doing something that promotes what you're talking about?
Yeah. So it's complicated, but I'm going to run you through a few slides here without trying to turn this into some academic lecture, but it's important to kind of understand all the work that has gone into this, because sport in America is a highly disjointed space. We're one of the only nations in the world that does not have a Ministry of Sport or Department of Sport to coordinate sport activity. And yet it is the biggest sports market in the world, right? And so to attack this, to address the problem, you've really got to develop a concept of that people can really rally around. So 10 years ago, we created this thing called Project Play. Rick is with us, Ken is with us, you guys are all familiar with, Carrie is here as well, Bill Mayer, a number of folks in this room are very familiar with our work. And it really starts with a vision of just like, what are we trying to do here? We're trying to build healthy children and communities through sports. Okay, terrific. Well, how do we do that? You create a framework, 8 strategies for the 8 sectors that touch the lives of kids. You call them out, you say, listen, you all have a role in being part of the solution. And you think about the values. We at the Institute encourage people to think about what their values. And so what we have done in coordination with a lot of the leaders and the organizations we work with is anchoring our sports system in the values of health and inclusion. So individual health, public health, and inclusion, meaning everybody should have access to an opportunity to play sports. The 8 strategies that we've crowdsourced, and I don't need to give you, they're all pretty obvious here, but like asking kids what they want, which I talked about earlier. We've got to reintroduce free play. We've got to encourage sports sampling. We need to revitalize in-town leagues, which are local, low-cost opportunities. It doesn't have to be travel ball at 7 years old where it's so expensive. It really does not need to be that way. Thinking small, which is about being creative with the available spaces in your community. It's designing for development, which is anchoring our sports system and the principles of age-appropriate play. 6 is not 16. Maybe kids don't need to be shooting on the 10-foot hoop when they're 5 years old. Training coaches in the key competencies in working with kids. Safety, sport-specific skills, that type of stuff. Emphasizing prevention, because sport can be great, but you might end up with a concussion or you might end up with a knee injury. So what we do is we rally people around these 8 different strategies. You want me to keep going, or you?
Well, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
In the year 2000, the National Science Foundation commissioned a study about why we were falling behind the Chinese, our great enemy, in science. And the commission came up with this wonderful acronym called STEM. S-T-E-M, and everybody could pronounce it. They knew what it meant. It's science, technology, engineering, math. Do you have an acronym that is as good as that? And should we worry more about our kids being unfit or not able to compete with the Chinese in STEM?
It's not either or. Why does it have to be either or? I mean, what companies will tell you is they often want to hire athletes because they know how to work in a team environment. They have the soft skills. They're resilient. Some of these kids who have just been focused on STEM, they're kind of hard to work with. They don't know how to operate with other people. So I think it's a matter of just recognizing that both have value and stitching them together more intentionally.
All right. Suppose you have a kid who's a genius in chess, and that's all he or she wants to do is chess. Would you say, you should learn how to exercise a little more than move the chess pieces around, or just say, look, we can afford to have a few chess geniuses?
You create a really large chessboard where the pieces are heavy and you have the child move them.
All right.
How's that?
That's a good idea. I think they used to have that out here. Okay, go ahead.
All right, so who are the 8 sectors? I mean, the point is when you do collective impact, which is one of the things, Steve Patrick's with us here. He's the guru of collective impact. I've learned a lot from him. When you do collective impact, you gotta name the sectors. You gotta create cross-sector activation. So we've done that. We know that ESPN alone can't solve this, or the Olympic Committee can't solve this, or the NFL can't solve this. You gotta say all of you have a role in building healthy kids and communities through sports. And so we engage these different sectors. Dr. Murthy helped us launch Project Play. He's awesome. Challenged us to take it on the road, which we did. I won't go into it, but we've done a lot over the past 10 years that have, we got about 20,000 or so organizations look to us for kind of leadership
And
now.
for all of this, the government gives you a lot of money?
Government gives us nothing.
Nothing. So how do you get your money?
Corporations, foundations, individuals sometimes.
People that come to Aspen Ideas?
I'll talk to you afterward. I'll meet you in the hallway if you like. Yeah.
Okay,
Stuff
so
like that.
that's where you get your...
So we've got a lot done, but the key is how are we going to go? Where are we going to go from here? Right. Right now in this country, 51% of kids play sports, according to the U.S. Census Bureau data. We just launched today, 2 hours ago, news release went out, something called 63 by 30. And what is 63 by 30? It's a 6-year effort driven by select leading organizations that are motivated and well-positioned to measurably grow sport participation rates among youth. The members, you can see them all on there. It's most of the professional leagues. It's the Little League, it's the Olympic Committee, Nike and Under Armour, competitors. Most of these folks have been sitting around our table thinking about how to build healthy kids and communities through sports over the past 10 years. Again, we get the 63% from the federal government. The federal government has set that as their goal, and what we're asking people to do is rally around this particular
In
goal.
other words, 30 is the percentage of, is what? That's
No, 30 is the year 2030.
2030. Okay, by the year 2030, you want to have youth sports participation at 63%?
Correct.
What is it today?
51%.
51. Okay, so you want to go from 51 to 63 in 6 years or so.
Exactly. And the value proposition is this. That means we got to find 4 million kids to either get into sports or keep them involved in sports. And in a peer-reviewed journal piece that we put out a couple months ago, and with the help of the U.S. Department of HHS and otherwise, you can see all the numbers there. But there's real benefit,
Okay.
to doing
But
this.
how can you consider starting one for people who are a little older than the younger kids? What about the people, I mean, we need to get people in their 70s exercising, I think.
Well, there will be no worker productivity gains
I know,
if that
but
happens.
I know, but the older people, they need to hang around too, so what do you think about exercising them?
We'll get to it. We got to get it right at the base, and then we'll work our way up.
Okay.
We'll get to you, David. We'll come up with solutions other than the sauna.
All right, I know.
The good thing is that most Americans, 7 out of 10 Americans, believe this is a worthy goal, and the media companies and the leagues have rallied around a bit because they know that kids who play sports are 6.4 times more likely to become Orioles fans.
Okay, I hope so.
Yeah.
So how many of you watch the Olympics? How many of you think that if you had a better coach, you could be in the Olympics? You could have been in the Olympics. If you had better coaching, nobody? Okay. How many of you wanted to be in the Olympics? Anybody ever thought they could be in Olympics? Oh, wow, okay. All right. How many people here are going to be inspired to exercise a little more tomorrow than they were today? Anybody? Okay. Anybody? How many people here actually can walk 5 miles a day? Anybody ever? 5? Wow. How many do walk 5 miles a day? Wow. Uh-oh, I got to ratchet up my walking. I have a device on my iPhone that lets me, it says I'm doing more than I actually am. It's a special thing you can get. It says, it says I'm 3 miles. I actually says 10 miles, but it's a special thing you can buy. I got it from Apple. Okay. All right. So how many people here feel that they've learned something from this so far? Okay. You have some more. We're going to have some time for questions, but you have your last
Just
slide?
just a couple more because I want to stimulate conversation. I
right.
would like to make this a little more. We got plenty of time for Q&A, which we'd like to get to. The question is, how do you get to 63 by 30? Again, it's not like we're the Ministry of Sports. We're just a little program with 8 to 9 employees that wake up every day trying to drive the space forward. But we think we can do it by encouraging the private and the philanthropic sector to embrace this 63% target as their own. Don't just leave it up to the federal government to do it, and to build the dream team of leaders, which we're doing. We just announced that today. And amplify the impact of innovative organizations. So there's actually a lot of good stuff happening. If you're familiar with the youth sports environment, there's a lot of, things to wring your hands about, too much travel, too much money, et cetera, at a very early age. But there are some communities, there are programs out there that have figured out how to do things. So we're going to do something called solutions journalism. We'll get in there, we're going to figure out what they're doing, we're going to help people understand it, we'll package it, and we will put it before our organization and say, what can you do to put incentives behind scaling these types of programs? And then we're just going to lead the rally cry across.
What about the cancer part? Is it your view that if you exercise more, you're more likely to prevent the onset of cancer, or is that what your view? Or?
Yeah, that's what the research shows.
So if you exercise more, you're in reasonable shape, you're less likely to have a cancer.
13 types.
13 times less likely?
No, 13 types of cancer.
Oh, 13 types of cancer. Okay.
That's good.
That's pretty good. And you got to go back and exercise more the last 10 years, but I can't do that. Okay, go ahead.
So the question is this group, the 63 by 30 group, our folks who be put around this round table is, okay, what do you guys want to, where are our best opportunities to get to 63%? And the most energy right now is around these 3 buckets. One is encouraging sports sampling, so introducing kids to a wider variety of sports. Number 2, revitalizing these in-town leagues, because you can really get kids at scale if you help the YMCAs and the Boys and Girls Clubs and the Parks and Recs really build their programs. And the 3rd is training coaches, which is really about making kids, helping, we have a high attrition rate. Kids just have a bad coach, they quit, and they're done with the sport. How do we give coaches the tools to make it a stickier experience? So, yeah, I just want to kind of see that. That's what we're going to be doing as a program. And Jennifer Brown Lerner is here with me. She's our deputy and is involved deeply in a lot of this stuff we have here. This is what we're doing as a program, and this is where our stakeholders really want to dig in and make a difference.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, you have one more slide?
No, that's at the end.
No, that's your last slide.
Yeah.
Okay, so is playing beach volleyball distracting? I mean, I just always thought
In what way, David?
I just thought that it just might be distracting. It's not? You play it 3 times a week. I mean, you really like it. You're going to 5 times a week or something?
It's distracting because there are dolphins and there are whales going by, and you want to look at them.
I got it. Okay. All right. Well, okay. We have time for questions. Anybody? Here's one right here.
Hi. Here we go. Hi, my name is Sid Wilson. I'm the president and CEO of the Hispanic Association on Corporate Responsibility. My question is, when you look at sports from how can we achieve this goal, given some of the disparities, particularly at the early ages of some of the inner cities or other neighborhoods where they don't have an organized Little League baseball or junior football or other kinds of things where there may be a cost involved. And my question is, how do you think about that from that standpoint? And then my follow-up to that is that it would seem to me that aligning your local chambers of commerces who could sponsor these leagues and help revitalize it, because your town chamber is far more likely to invest in local leagues compared to a big national corporation. But what are your thoughts on that?
That's a great idea, and it's a great question. I'm glad you brought it up, because when we talk about sports in America, let me be a little bit reductive here, but you have two types of, you have the sport haves and the have-nots. Most of the people in this room are in the sport haves environment. Your kid has plenty of programs, you can afford them. My kids were in that category. My eldest kid played college soccer at Babson. I mean, it was fine. You go to inner city Baltimore, you go to Youngstown, Ohio, you go to Native American communities, you go to a number of rural communities, and it's a completely different environment. There's a lack of programs. Whereas in suburban communities, wealthier communities, what you have is a programs-rich, systems-poor kind of environment where everything is sort of chaotic and it's all coming at you and you can't tell who's the good actor and who's not. There are plenty of communities. In fact, kids from lower-income communities are half as likely to play sports as kids from upper-income communities.
You told me earlier when we were talking, one second. You told me earlier when we were talking that many schools no longer have PE classes because they've had to cut them back for cost or other reasons. So I always thought you had a PE class in junior high school, high school. Is that not the case anymore?
So No Child Left Behind had a real impact on the provision of PE in this country. It's typically available in elementary school, but not as much as we need it, and then it begins to disappear in middle and high school because schools were incentivized to show results related to what happened in classrooms. There were no incentives related to physical education, so it got deprioritized.
Okay.
And that's when this private recreation environment really began to take over.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, MSNBC, right here. This is going to be on tonight.
I'm Stephanie. What about that other end, that have end, where having access has taken it to a whole other level, that now youth sports and club sports have become so expensive, so all-encompassing, right? It's the summer, and kids who now play youth sports don't even have a weekend off because they've specialized in a sport when they're 4.
Right.
The kind of sports David is talking about is when somebody could pick up baseball in the 9th grade and actually play. That's not even an option anymore on the other side of the scale.
That's right, and it's a real problem, and parents don't know what to do with it. You know what I mean? Like your kid is in like a rec league at 5 and 6 years old, and all of a sudden the travel thing comes along, and all the other kids are doing it. You feel like you got to go with it, and there doesn't seem to be a more moderate option to keep your kid active. These are systems problems, and this is why we need a youth sports policy agenda in this country, which we are developing in concert with our partners. We need policy that basically helps the governing bodies, the Olympic Committee, the national governing bodies of sport, states, which have largely, they don't really like get involved in this stuff. They need to start recognizing that we need to create environments that parents can make the best decisions for their kids. They're trapped, and you don't even know. Someone might be asking you to pay $5,000, but you have no idea if the coaches were background checked, if they're trained in key competencies, any of it. It doesn't live on the website. So we need to come up with, whether it be private sector solutions, like a Yelp for youth sports, or use artificial intelligence. I think there's some real possibilities there. How can we guide parents based upon what the needs of the unique needs of their kids are, because they're lost right now. They love their kids, but they don't know what to do.
Okay, here and then there, here and then there.
So just real quick, the problem that Stephanie brings up is a lot of the national sports organizations are driving and creating that problem. U.S. Soccer wants to win a World Cup. We need 6 Christian Passaic to win.
Yeah.
We only have 1. We get about 1 every about 10 years.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of an accident thing.
Yep.
So that drive is really a lot of these U.S. gymnastics, U.S. swimming, all the rest of that.
But it's,
So how do we, if you're working with them, how do you do this and that simultaneously?
you say to U.S. Soccer, if you're going to be a member of U.S. Soccer, well, first of all, if you're offering soccer in this country, you need to at least register with U.S. Soccer. And then U.S. Soccer needs to set minimum conditions under which you're going to be a member. It might be distribution of materials around what's proper athletic development. One of the reasons we have more kids in uniforms than any nation in the world, soccer uniforms, but we can't produce world-class players, is because
On the men's side, not on the women's side.
on the women's side, but the rest of the world's catching up on the women's side, and
sure.
it's because they do athletic development better. Look at Spain. Gorgeous players, they're just beautiful style of play, and it's because they're not committed to winning age group national championships at 8 and 9 and 10 years old. They basically say, no, that's the time to grind skills. We'll have a practice ratio of practice to game ratio of 3 to 1. We're going to progressively develop an athlete. Right now, the national governing bodies of sport are so important, but they are not really empowered to help other organizations in the space get it right, and then message to parents to help them understand what good looks like as you move through the system.
Thank you.
There was back here, there was a question back here. Yeah, this lady here. Yes.
Hi, I'm Francesca Schuler with the Nantucket Project. I'm curious what Project Play is doing about the issue with girls. So a lot of girls get into sports, but 43% drop out around somewhere between 12 and 14, like twice the rate of boys. And I'm curious where that fits and how you guys are thinking about that issue.
So when we think about 63%, if we're going to go from 54 to 63, our best opportunities to do so are with the populations that have the lowest percentage rates. So that's girls, that's low-income kids, that's kids from homes where English is a second language, et cetera. So we recognize that that is a priority population. Now, there are specific organizations like the Women's Sports Foundation or otherwise that are really super dialed into it. Our job as something of a meta convener is to make sure organizations like that have a seat at the table and that we continue to produce data that will remind people of these particular gaps. With girls in particular, the problem is in urban and rural, mostly. Suburban girls, yes, there's still challenges, but it's the urban girls and the rural girls who have the highest dropout rates, and we really need to develop solutions.
The only area that didn't improve with sports was substance abuse.
What?
Substance abuse. You want to talk about why it may be even more in the athletes and what can we do about it?
You mean, so athletes, according to the data, have lower drug use rates, higher binge drinking rates. Yeah. So just want to clarify that, yeah. Oh, what can you reduce? How can you do that? I mean, the nice thing about being an athlete is especially if you're in a team environment, is you're responsible to other people. So, like, if you're all hopped up on drugs and you got a game the next day, you're kind of letting other people down. So I think the more you can get kids into environments where there's a level of accountability to other kids,
Right.
the more likely you're going to,
Do you consider golf a sport?
a colleague of mine, Rachel Nichols, when we were on E60 together, I thought had a pretty good standard as to what's a sport and what's not. And her rule was that if you can eat a sandwich and play that sport, it's probably not a sport.
Okay, all the way in the back. This lady in the back. Okay.
Hi.
Ben?
Hi, Tom. Just to pick up.
But golf is a sport, okay? The PGA of America is a partner of ours, and it's a sport. Yes.
To pick up on the youth sport question. Hi, Tom. It's
Hi.
Katie.
Katie.
You were talking about the transition collegiate sports is going through with NIL, et cetera, and paying these players gobs of money. As you know, in the spring of 2022, 5 collegiate athletes took their own lives over a 6-week period. And I'm just curious, as we're making this transition and really changing the whole nature of collegiate sports, how concerned are you about the mental health issues that come with social media pressure, NIL pressures, gambling pressures? And it's really creating an unhealthy environment for a lot of these college athletes. Is the NCAA doing enough in your view?
Dr. Brian Hainline, who was the chief medical officer, just left, I think did some very good things. He put mental health on the table, but he is attacking a system that is much larger than himself. These kids show up in college and their bodies are sometimes broken down from 10 years of playing, and sometimes they just, they have this identity foreclosure thing. They've thought of themselves as an athlete at a very early age, and maybe you don't make the team or you're not starting, and it becomes, you don't have the footing. I think that's a real challenge. So how do we introduce sports to kids in a way where we say, you're more than an athlete. Right. You are a whole human being, and let's talk about it. How do we give coaches the skills to identify the kids who are having mental health problems so they can route them to the right person? And then just not be such a jerk. I mean, sometimes coaches are really, really hard on kids, and they take that idea that, pressure builds diamonds or whatever it is. But you know what? Yeah, but when you're 6 and 8 and 12 and 13, these are kids who are developing. They're human beings first.
What percentage of college athletes actually become professional athletes? I assume less than 1/10 of 1% probably.
Yeah, it's extremely
So
low.
the chance of actually making money as an athlete is de minimis.
Yeah, this should be the goal. And I would encourage every parent out there, when you're introducing your kid to sports, is to keep that statistic in mind, number one, and then ask yourself, well, what would I want my child to get out of sports? And it's usually not a professional career or even a college scholarship. You want them to develop healthy habits for life, to be connected to other kids, to have mental health benefits and everything that flows to kids. So that is a really important conversation that we need to have.
Okay, other question? Right here, there's one.
Hi, Ben Cope with KIPP Public Schools, the KIPP Foundation. David Rubenstein, growing up in Maryland, I swore I was going to play for the Baltimore Orioles when I grew up, so I'm not blaming anybody that I didn't quite make it, but I'm still available if you're looking.
So you're still available, you're saying?
Yeah, still available. No, but seriously, KIPP serves 125,000 mostly low-income kids around the country, so first off, we'd love to partner, but what are you seeing in schools where there's so much pressure, especially post-COVID, pull test scores up, recover from COVID, in terms of blending this into the day and the end of the day? What's working well?
So we launched a 2-year research project a couple years ago with Dick's and a couple other corporations, and looked at the high school environment. And what we found is high school sports has largely consolidated around the best athletes. So we've gotten rid of intramurals, we've gotten rid of freshman teams, we've gotten rid of middle school teams, and the kids who make these soccer and baseball teams have often been playing club sports since a very early age. And that means the kids who can't afford the club sport environment have less access to it. And then there's just real pressure around the kids. So we believe there's much more room for bringing back intramurals, bringing back student-led clubs, it's not about getting rid of interscholastic play. Fine, it's there, it's great, it's a wonderful American tradition. But how do we develop other forms of sport that kids can play in? What we did find too is that charter schools were the most innovative. They were the most nimble, often because they could. It was their, they had to. They live in a more competitive environment. They were more willing to partner with local universities to get kids into sailing and snowboarding and surfing and rugby and some of these other sports. So we'd love to talk to you about that. I think charter schools could lead the way.
All right, here's a question.
Fidel Vargas.
What does HSF stand for?
Hispanic Scholarship Fund.
Okay.
I'm the president of the Hispanic Scholarship Fund. I was the youngest elected mayor back in 1992 to 1997 in the country. And if I missed this because I came in a little late, I'm sorry, but what are your plans? Because this has to scale in working with mayors, like the U.S. Conference of Mayors or the National League of Cities. What type of work are you doing there?
So we are doing a lot of work now, after 10 years of trust building and straight collective impact, and thinking about what is the role of government at each of the 3 different levels. What's the proper role of the federal government? What's the proper role of state government? What can they do? And what can local government do? Local government can be really effective because they own most of the spaces where kids play sports, meaning the park and recs. And right now the park and recs pretty much just say, hey, whoever signs up gets the field, and show us you have insurance, and your check needs to clear, and that's it. Couldn't they raise that a little bit? Couldn't they say, listen, these are public assets, and if you're going to get access to our fields, or even preferred rates, incentives, or otherwise, show us that you've got kids from free and reduced, low-income kids, or the girls, whatever you want sport to be in your community, can use that asset as a way to begin to compel.
So I think I read in some of your materials that private equity firms are actually investing in youth sports. So can you explain what they're doing? Are they buying, junior baseball teams and thinking they can make a profit? What are they doing?
Because they can, yeah. Stephanie will probably be better.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, but private equity firms I think they're investing in some of these things.
They are, like Josh Harris and
Okay.
Blitzer. They're private equity is getting into space. There's more than $30 billion a year spent by parents on youth sports alone in this country. That's more money than is flowing through the NFL or college football or any other piece of our sports system. So private equity, of course, sees an opportunity to come in, aggregate this, the assets in this different environment, and try to do something. My question for you, I would love to ask you about this. How can is this good? Is this necessarily good? Is it necessarily bad? And if it's good, how can it be good? What can private equity do to improve the environment?
Well, private equity is obviously driven to get a good rate of return for their investors. And so there are instances where you can make money, I guess, investing in certain youth sports. but it hasn't yet been a gigantic kind of thing. What private equity people are doing now, as we see, they're investing in sports. And you'll see, I think private equity will take over college sports at some point because, as we were talking before, in the end, I think the big conferences will basically sell out to private equity firms, and they will basically either run the conference or finance it, or the big teams. So Ohio State, University of Texas football teams, they're going to be financed by private equity firms at some point, I'm sure. We're pretty much out of time, so let me just...
I want to go to one more thing with Carrie.
We have one more?
No, I just want to, before you close.
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to recognize Carrie Penner, who's with
Okay,
us
all right.
here today. Because when you talk about
Okay.
solutions at the national level, at the grassroots level, we're going to be launching, in addition to 63 by 30, a state-based initiative that Carrie and the Broncos are supporting.
Yeah. Thank you, and it's great to hear you guys here today. I'm Carrie Penner. I chair the board of the Denver Broncos Foundation, and we're excited to partner with Project Play Colorado, which we've launched, and it's a really interesting partnership. It's really, the foundation of it is the Aspen Institute, and in Colorado we have our youth. We have 917,000 youth across Colorado. We have 54% who are involved in youth sports in some way or another. We're working on the 63 by 30 as well. And we're really looking across the entire state of Colorado. We're funding quite a bit with girls flag football, and the state of Colorado is just the 11th state to sanction girls flag as a senior, as a high school sport. So we're really trying to find different ways to get into the communities, rural, urban, and suburban across Colorado, and bring more youth into this. But we also have those gaps that you talk about. Girls in Colorado, 48% are active in sports, and so we have a lot of growth there. Our Latino students are at 43%, and then we also have our students with physical disabilities also at 43%. So there are a lot of categories where we have opportunities for this, but it really is, going to your question, Fidel, on the partnerships, it really is public-private with government, and then having a great opportunity to partner with someone like the Aspen Institute. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Carrie. Really appreciate it.
So I want to thank you for what you're doing. It's obviously a great benefit for the country, and hopefully people will ask you more about it. I'll close with one anecdote about my own athletic career, which is not that great. But actually, I played, to show you how old I am, I played lacrosse, which is a sport better known now in the United States than it was when I was playing it. And I played on a team that went to play in Australia. This was in 1970. And we went down to play in Australia. And in those days, it was so different, because in those days, if you wanted to play sports, during halftime, you did not hydrate. The theory was if you drank water, you would get a cramp. Some of you my age may remember this. So you just sat there, sweating, but you weren't going to get a cramp in the second half. So we're sitting there sweating in Australia. The heat was pretty high. And all of a sudden, we see the Australian players, they're drinking, but they're drinking beer. And we said, wait a second, they're not only going to be getting cramps, they're going to be drunk in second half. But it turned out they were better in the second half than we were, so we adopted that approach. So anyway.
They had less anxiety. They were more relaxed after drinking.
All right, thank you all.
Yeah, thank you all. And if anybody like...
Okay.